Welcome to the Proceedings podcast. I'm Bill Hamlet, editor-in-chief of Proceedings magazine. Today is Monday, August 8th, and it has been a busy and interesting week in naval and global security news. Chinese military exercises continued over this past weekend in the wake of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan last week. Our USNI news team has provided a lot of coverage, including a great story this morning highlighting 11 Chinese PLA rocket forces ballistic missiles landing in waters near Taiwan and in Japan's exclusive economic zone. China's two active duty aircraft carriers have been underway for the past week. The USS Ronald Reagan, CVN 76, the USS Tripoli, USS Tripoli LHA-7, and the USS America LHA-6 are also underway in the 7th Fleet AOR right now. So some folks have reached out to me via LinkedIn and other avenues and asked why China is so upset about Speaker Pelosi's visit last week. A couple of things. First, she was the highest ranking U.S. leader to visit Taiwan in 25 years. And second, Chinese President, Communist Party Chairman Xi Jinping is preparing for this fall's 20th Party Congress, and he is aiming for an unprecedented third term as leader. So he has to look tough right now. We are living in interesting times, to be sure. Quick sponsor update. Today's episode is brought to you by Raytheon Missiles and Defense. The SPY-6 family of radars is not just revolutionary, it's ready now. SPY-6 is being integrated on ships across the U.S. fleet to provide greater range, increased sensitivity, and more accurate discrimination for air and missile defense. Learn more at rtx.com/SPY-6. Quick reminder, we have two deadlines for essay contests coming up very soon. Our annual Marine Corps essay contest has a deadline of 31 August and a top prize of $5,000. And our fiction contest, co-sponsored with the Center for International Maritime Security, or CIMSEC, has a top prize of $500 and a deadline of mid-September. To find out more about our essay contest, go to usni.org/essay-contests. Okay, now it is my great pleasure to introduce our guest today, Major General Gregg Martin, U.S. Army retired. He is the author of a courageous and introspective article in the August issue of Proceedings. It is titled, Bipolar General, What Can We Learn? It appears starting on pages 62 and 63 of the August issue, or you can find it online at usni.org/proceedings. General Martin, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Bill. It's great to be with you.
All right, sir, I want to highlight a little bit about your background for our listeners and viewers who perhaps haven't heard of you before. You served 36 years in the U.S. Army. You graduated from West Point, class of 79. You were a combat engineer. You led a brigade in combat operations in Iraq during Operation Iraqi Freedom. You have a PhD from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and you are the bipolar general that's mentioned in this article. It's an autobiographical piece. And you start by saying bipolar disorder struck you in 2003. You were a brigade commander, you were in Iraq, and you served for the next 11 years with unrecognized, undiagnosed, and worsening mental illness. Sir, what was that like?
Well, I didn't ever know that I had a mental illness. I never realized I had bipolar until I was diagnosed in November of 2014. So 11 full years later was the first time I ever realized that I had bipolar disorder. So now that I know I had bipolar, at least since 2003, I first went into mania, but it was a high performing mania where I had tremendous energy, enthusiasm, focus, drive, problem solving skills, creativity. It helped me perform at a much higher level than I otherwise would have. I felt like Superman. I didn't need sleep. So the whole attack to Baghdad, it was the mania actually helped me, and I felt great. I was euphoric the whole time. Once the regime fell and we settled into what became the bulk of the one-year deployment, we settled into, a form of guerrilla warfare, counterinsurgency, that sort of thing, and we're living on base camps. that's when things sort of shifted and I went into periods of depression, but they were relatively short, like a couple hours, maybe a couple days, but then I'd bounce back out of it. And the depression was characterized by low energy, sometimes confusion, withdrawal from people. Sometimes I could be indecisive, and just really being down. But again, in Iraq, most of my experience was manic. But when we got back to Germany, and then over the next decade, my manic highs got higher and higher. My depressive lows sunk lower and lower until 2014, president of National Defense University, I went into what they call full-blown mania, where essentially I went into a state of madness. I was insane. That did not really feel good. It was kind of a bizarre experience. Still didn't know there was anything wrong with me. And then my performance became so erratic, and a lot of people reported to the chairman's office saying, "Hey, we think there's something wrong with General Martin. He's really acting crazy, disruptive, over the top." And then General Dempsey, the chairman, he did a series of assessments and an investigation, and he came to the conclusion that I did have a mental illness, and he removed me from command and gave me a command order to get a mental health evaluation, which I did. In fact, July 2014, that month, I got 3 evaluations. All 3 of them said, "You're fine, you're fit for duty." And we didn't know I had bipolar until I sank into terrible depression with psychosis. And 4 months later, I was a zombie. I couldn't function. And at that point, the doctors said, "Aha, you have bipolar disorder." And I was thankful for the diagnosis, because then I said, I knew something was wrong with me when I was in depression and psychotic. And I was grateful that they diagnosed me so I could go about getting healed and recover.
Sir, for our listeners, I just wanted to say that I was a student at NDU, the National Defense University, the year that you took over. So that was in first or second semester of the 2012-2013 academic year. And you came in and you just had all this incredible energy. And I remember all the students and all of my buddies in our seminars, we were like, my God, this guy's amazing. You had combat experience in Iraq. You had a PhD from MIT, and when you spoke to the student body at NDU, you just had all this energy, right? And I think, and you reference that a little bit in your article, where you say people called you like the Hoo-Yah Bunny, and I mean the Energizer Bunny. Like people recognized you as this incredibly energetic person. And then a year later, we all heard that you had left under a cloud, and it was like what happened, and we started to hear some of the rumors, but I was incredibly proud to be here at the Naval Institute when you submitted your first article on mental illness to us, which we published a year ago, and then this longer piece, which is, and many people have already reached out to us this in the past couple of weeks since we published it, just said, wow, kudos for General Martin being so brave to share his story, because it's it's not one that you hear, right? And so I wanted to ask you, among senior officers, is there a sense that PTSD and mental illness is something that happens to other people, or happens to more junior people, or happens to people who aren't as tough as I am, for example? What's the sense of stigma, or is there even conversation that happens among senior officers about mental illness, or about feeling the need to get some help?
So I've been off active duty since 2015, but I would say it was a topic that was discussed. Um, People were encouraged to go get help. There were a handful of senior officers, general officers, who came out in the open with their problems, their challenges with depression, PTSD, traumatic brain injury, and the like. And they were really applauded for coming out in the open and setting a really, really good example. And since then, I think there have been more. And there's also been a number of senior non-commissioned officers who have come out and, with their issues. So I would say there's more people that are recognizing it and getting help and treatment for mental health conditions.
Gotcha. Uh, sir, what was it, being a two-star, everyone looking up to you? I just would like for our listeners and viewers here, if you'd share a little bit more of the stories of, what you went through in the last 6 months or so before General Dempsey relieved you, the kinds of behaviors, the kinds of things that you sort of felt yourself doing. And then the 6 months or so after, and you just described a little bit of you had three interviews with mental health professionals, and you were not diagnosed, and then it took a couple months to get a diagnosis. And I think you went into the VA system. You were up in Vermont for a while, living up in Vermont, and using the big VA hospital up in White River Junction. But take us through a little bit of what a year in the life of General Martin was, from that last 6 months of being the president of NDU to suddenly finding yourself in a VA hospital.
Sure. So the last 6 months, I elevated into a state of full-blown mania. All the characteristics of mania, incredible energy, enthusiasm, drive, creativity, talking rapidly with forced speech, flight of ideas, a sense, a feeling of grandiosity where I believed I was on a direct mission from God to transform NDU. Extreme religiosity. I mean, my religious behaviors went to extreme excess. So what was I doing at NDU in terms of mission? So General Dempsey brought me in there in the summer of 2012 with a very clear mandate to lead transformation and change at NDU. He felt that it was underperforming, it was behind the times, and it needed to be upgraded to be more relevant, more effective, more integral to U.S. defense. And I had worked for General Dempsey 4 times in the past, going back to 1997. And he really liked the transformation work I had done at the Army War College previous to NDU. And so he said, Greg, same playbook, go in there, make the changes. It's going to be tough because you've got a lot of entrenched bureaucratic resistance, but you already know how to deal with this stuff. Go for it. We'll talk at least once a quarter, if not more often, and let me know how things are going and if you need any help or support or whatever. So I went in there and I was given the mission, go in and break China. So I went in very aggressively, which was partly a reflection of my bipolar disorder and the mania that had really taken over my mind. I was very aggressive, really leaning forward, making big decisions rapidly with the full support of the chairman. But as we all know from studying leading organizational change, you can only go as fast as the organization will allow you to go and as fast as they'll accept. And, you can't smash your way to transformation and organizational change. So I generated a lot of resistance, whatever normal resistance there would be, which you're always going to have in any government organization or any large organization. The resistance was fierce. Senior officials at NDU started leaking negative reports to the media about me. There were, some articles written. People started organizing a very effective guerrilla campaign to slow me down and to undercut what the chairman was trying to do. And that was going on at the Pentagon and at NDU and in the different colleges and in the faculty and on the staff. And I just, I'm a combat engineer, and it's, you go forward fast and hard and fight your way through resistance. And I was not going to slow down. And I got nothing but great feedback from, my chain of command going up to the chairman. So what happened, though, was a couple months into that, I started, as the resistance grew, the pressure, the stress on me was like pouring gasoline on an already burning fire. And I erupted into a madman. I mean, saying that I was mad is not overstating it. And everything that I was doing in my manic state got higher and higher. to where, sometimes I would, talk for 2 hours in a row. I'd call unprogrammed meetings. I couldn't keep track of time. I pretty much stopped doing administrative work, which hurts the organization. And that's the point where all these reports went up to General Dempsey. And I also had this growing psychosis, which consisted of mostly delusions, paranoia, and some hallucinations. I would be at meetings and I would have flashbacks into Iraq, with bombs going off and explosions and, dead bodies and fires. And I literally would feel like I was back on the battlefield in Iraq, like I was the commander, like I was Superman. I would also see people who I knew were my bureaucratic foes. I would see, and this is a hallucination, their faces morph into, creatures like rats and snakes and things like that. That's pretty out there, but I just took it in stride and kept going. And I developed this deep paranoia that people were out to get me, which they were actually. They wanted to get me fired, which they did actually. And then where the paranoia took over on its own is I then, in my own sick brain, thought they wanted to see me get arrested, put in jail, where I would be, tortured, beaten, murdered, dying in a pool of blood in jail. And so that delusion took me over, and I started drinking more and more, and I started going on more midnight bike rides, riding my bike as fast as I could through DC, hallucinating I was flying over the monuments. And that aspect of my bipolar was very hellish. It was frightening. It was creepy. It was, just not something that was pleasant or fun. And then, I got removed from the job based on my craziness. And then I went and got all these evaluations, and they said, and I didn't believe there was anything wrong with me. I thought it was a plot to get me out of NDU to stop the transformation. And that was, in fact, partly true, which is the nature of delusions. There's always a kernel of truth in your delusion, but then it's spun into a much bigger web that's not true. But once the doctors told me, you're okay, there's nothing wrong with you, I totally believed it. I said, these people, they did plot to get rid of me. This was an orchestrated campaign of guerrilla warfare. And then I went for about a month where I was intensely angry, bitter, manic. I was in a state of mania, but it wasn't the happy, joyful mania. It was angry, bitter mania where, I'm fortunate that I didn't resort to violence, that I didn't get arrested, that I didn't crash in car, that all kinds of bad things can happen in a manic state. So that went on for several months until I spiraled and crashed into severe depression. And finally the doctors diagnosed me correctly, and I was in terrible shape. In fact, for the next 2 years, through my retirement in May of 2015 until I began to recover almost 2 years later, I was literally in a fight for my life. I had what in the VA was what saved me, and they were terrific. They detected what they call passive suicidal ideations. Fortunately, I never had active ideations where I wanted to take my own life, but passive ideations are equally deadly, potentially deadly and dangerous. And what a passive ideation, for example, with me, is I had these ideations that I was still going to get arrested, put in jail, beaten, murdered, killed in jail. That's a passive ideation. The other thing is I would have these visions, sort of delusions that an invisible force would grab me and throw me under the wheels of a rapidly moving 18-wheeler truck. And my body would be ripped apart. My arms, legs, head would be torn off, thrown in all directions. Or that I'd be driving a car and the same invisible force would grab my hands and drive me right into a bridge abutment or another oncoming truck. And so when I went to the VA, the doctor there, the psychiatrist, he was the first person that ever asked me, do you have any morbid thoughts of death or dying? No one had asked me that question in the military system or civilian. And I said, yeah, I do, as a matter of fact. And so I explained to them what they were. And he said, whoa, those are passive ideations. And he said, do you want to die? And I said, well, to be honest about it, for the good of my wife, my family, and the world, I think everybody would be better off if I were dead. I don't want to kill myself, but it would be good to die. Everybody would be better off. And so after that conversation, the psychiatrist at the VA said, hey, we've got a great inpatient facility, multidisciplinary treatment. I think it'd be really good for you to go and stay, So I was there for weeks. But, going back to your question, so I talked about the 6 months before being removed from command, and I think I covered the 6 months after removal from command. But at that point, after I'd been removed and diagnosed, I was living in what I call bipolar hell. I mean, your life is just hellish, miserable, full of delusions, hallucinations, fear. The high point of my day was going to bed at night and then hoping I wouldn't wake up in the morning.
That must have been just absolutely terrifying, all of that. And how was your family reacting while you were going through that, bipolar hell?
It was really hard on them. I had two sons who were on active duty in the Army at the time, and they were both overseas, deployed, Afghanistan. And they kept in touch to monitor how I was doing. My wife, who I call St. Margaret, she was just, she was badly, badly shaken by this whole experience because she didn't know what was going on. And for her, it was such an incremental buildup to the full-blown mania and the insanity. She didn't realize there was something really wrong until about the same time that General Dempsey realized it and removed me from command. But so she was kind of like a frog in a pot of water that heated up slowly over time, years, months. And then she was just the frog that got boiled at the end. But she was rock steady. She never quit on me, never gave up, was always supportive, trying to get me help. Didn't, freak out and go crazy herself or, walk away or divorce me or anything. And I asked her, I said, Maggie, why a lot of spouses would have left someone who was so mentally ill and such a basket case as me, what made you stay with me? And she said, the big thing was that I never quit, never gave up, kept trying to get better. And so she believed that as long as I wanted to get better and I kept trying, that she wouldn't quit either. So she was tremendous. And then we had our youngest son, actually, he was going to college in DC. So he lived at home with us at Fort McNair when I was at NDU. And he was very astute, very compassionate, really smart, knew what was going on. And he actually had friends on the staff and faculty at NDU that he would talk to about me. And so he had kind of a good thing going on to try to help me.
We've got a few comments from our listeners and viewers who are just saying, thank you for speaking out on mental health. Salute to the general for being such an amazing advocate and for the course of his service. I wanted to get to, there's a couple things at the end of your article where you talk about what the military can do better as an institution to support individuals who suffer from mental illness and PTSD and bipolar. And then you also talk about what can an individual person do. One of the questions that has gone through my mind is, what do we do for our battle buddies, our shipmates, our fellow Marines and sailors and soldiers, if we're serving with somebody who we suspect, like General Dempsey did with you, right, is battling mental illness or is dealing with PTSD, or even perhaps even harder is the question, what do you do when your boss has got a problem like you had when you were the NDU president? How do you deal with that in your shipmates or among your bosses?
So the first thing institutionally is we need to improve our training in order to be able to recognize the signs of a mental health disorder or a mental health issue. Because remember, somewhere between 20 and 25% of global population, so that includes the United States, it includes the US military, 20 to 25% have or are suffering from some kind of mental health condition. I mean, that's a lot. I mean, so extrapolate that for a military that's 2 million people. So number one, you have to train for it. Like in my case, over the whole period I had bipolar, I went back and interviewed a whole lot of people from brigade command on, and many of them in retrospect says, oh yeah, we recognized something unusual, something that wasn't right, but we didn't know what it was. We just thought you were like super energetic and enthusiastic, which was true, but I was going beyond that into a state of mania. So they didn't recognize it. Number two, if they did recognize it, nobody talked about it, nobody said anything. And I think that's because subordinates are naturally reluctant to address a mental health topic with a superior. Number two, a lot of people really liked me. I mean, you said that, people at NDU really admired people in my commands all the way from second lieutenant forward. I mean, they loved working for me because I was happy and energetic, and we accomplished things. They felt great about the unit. We always had good morale. And so they didn't want to do anything to hurt me. Was a big part of it. So people, if they can recognize the symptoms, then they have to be prepared for the unpleasant conversations. Like me being a colonel or a general, I don't expect a private or a sergeant to come and say, hey, Colonel Martin, I think you have bipolar disorder. You ought to go get checked out. But there's all kinds of alternative ways to have that conversation. Like a subordinate could go and speak to, my deputy, or to another 06, or they could report it to the person above my head, like people really did with me at NDU. I mean, they reported what they thought, and rightfully so, because I thought there was nothing wrong with me, but I was wrong. There was something wrong. And so a lot of people, dozens, went to the 3-star general who kind of oversaw NDU. They went to the chairman, they went to others. And I mean, that was okay because it alerted the people above me there's something going on with Martin. And to General Dempsey's great credit, he is a great leader. He didn't rush to get rid of me. He didn't blackball me. He didn't do anything like that. He actually did a very deliberate series of assessments that looked at NDU. They talked to the students, talked to the faculty, and then they focused in directly on me as the leader. And he brought in outside people who didn't have a dog in the fight. And, when Dempsey got those back briefs, he came to the overwhelming conclusion, hey, there's something wrong with Gregg. For his good, his family's good, and the NDU's, health, I need to get him out of there and order him to get an evaluation.
Did you know that the chairman was doing that evaluation while you were president? Did you know that that was all going on?
Yeah, I did. I knew. And he told me he was doing it. He told me what he's going to do. But I was so manic. I was like, hey, that's great. General Dempsey, thank you. That's wonderful. I'll get even more good feedback on the great transformation that we're doing. So thank you for doing that. And the day that he removed me from command, I walked in his office, and I didn't know if he was going to promote me, fire me, extend me. And but I walked in the office. I should have known I was getting fired, but I didn't because I was so manic. And I walk in the office, I saw the lawyer. I said, ooh, this is not good. I'm probably going to get fired. And, Dempsey, he said, he walked across the room, gave me a big hug, said, Gregg, I love you like a brother. And you've done an amazing job, but you have until 5 p.m. today to resign or I will fire you. And oh, by the way, I'm ordering you to get a mental health exam this week. And when he said that to me, I said, thank you, sir. This is great because that means God is moving me from NDU to an even bigger and better assignment. I'm taking my assignments from God. And that's very characteristic of intense mania.
Wow. That's just, what an amazing story. We got a couple people who are throwing into the chat here that protecting sleep, also protecting sleep will minimize mental health issues. We're complex machines. More sleep keeps these issues minimized. I'm just, you talked a lot about going without sleep in your manic state. I've heard so many people in combat operations who tend to go for days without sleep, sometimes weeks without sleep, or sleeping an hour or two a night. What's your experience with sleep, and how did that play? Did that play at all when you were finally getting the help you needed through the VA system and follow-on care? Did sleep become part of how you got on top of this?
Yes, sleep is, way undervalued and not strongly understood how important it is for the brain and your entire healthfulness. But once I got diagnosed with bipolar disorder, I said, okay, bipolar's, this is bad. I mean, it's can lead to suicide and all kinds of other things. So all the things, I started reading books about it, watching videos, etc. And one of, the most important things is sleep. And so following the diagnosis, I started sleeping more, building it into my schedule. And then since the stay at the VA and my recovery process, sleep is an absolutely fundamental part of my healthy living and my ongoing lifelong recovery. So, I mean, I discipline myself, and my wife's a big help on this. So, we go to bed. We're lights out sleeping by 10 p.m. and we don't wake up until 6 a.m. So that's 8 solid hours, which, all the medical people say that's good. And I also have developed, and I can do it in my retirement. But even if you're still on active duty, if you can build in a way to take a nap, even a short cat nap of 20 minutes can make an amazing difference in your brain health and in your overall health. And so I take a nap every afternoon. I call it my fitness nap. So if I were to stop sleeping in a healthy, consistent manner, that could be enough to trigger a relapse in my bipolar disorder and bring on another full onset of bipolar. That's how important sleep is. So prior, my life habits, I think when I was in high school, I probably got enough sleep. When I was a cadet at West Point, I probably didn't. And then coming up in the Army, like as a lieutenant and when I was single, we worked really hard. We played really hard. We stayed out late. We went on, I was stationed in Europe the first 6 years. We went on incredible road trips on the weekends all over Europe. And with almost no sleep between the driving, the partying, the sightseeing, the skiing. And then when I got, when I went to MIT and got all those degrees, I was not sleeping. I was working all the time. And then by then I got, you're kind of a senior officer as an 05, 06 battalion command, brigade command, and the equivalent on a ship. I was totally bought in to the Army and the military ethic and profession. Over a period of years, my life morphed to where I was the Army was me. It was my work, it was my play, it was my pleasure, it was everything. And so again, I didn't get much sleep. And all those years, decades of not enough sleep, I think probably were contributing factors to the onset of my bipolar disorder.
Well, there's certainly so many people that even if they don't have diagnosed mental illness, you get to the end of your military careers, and so many veterans have sleep disorders, right? Sleep apnea and all, you end up going to a sleep study when you get ready to retire for your VA physical and all those kinds of things. So it's definitely a problem, and Proceedings readers and our members will recognize that we've published a lot of articles, primarily in the last couple of years by Captain John Cordell, who's a surface warfare officer, and oftentimes with a co-author, Dr. Nina Shattuck at the Naval Postgraduate School. And they have done a lot of looking at sleep. The 2016 collisions of the U.S. 7 fleet ships, the Fitzgerald and the McCain, sleep came out in the follow-on investigations into both those collisions. And then there's been a lot of effort in the Navy to what we call going to a circadian watch rhythm, where instead of pushing your body in the negative direction. You're letting people have the same consistent sleep cycle day after day after day. So you make the ship's work conform to some extent so that people can have consistent time to sleep, and including what you just said, the battle nap, right? Having that 20-30 minute nap kind of middle of the day or afternoon where you can sort of reset and de-stress a little bit. That's a great point. So we're running short of time here, but I wanted to let you get to a couple things that you cite at the end of your article, which is, as an individual, how did you get on top of, get ahead of, get under, get your bipolar disorder under control, and what are some recommendations that you have for others who might find themselves really struggling with PTSD or mental illness of any type?
Number one, go get help. Go see a medical professional and get evaluated. And if you get diagnosed with a mental health condition, don't fight it, don't deny it. Like in my case, I embraced it. I said, okay, this is the truth. I know there's something wrong with me, and the problem is bipolar disorder. There's something wrong with my brain. So then how can I get better? So I worked closely with psychiatrists, therapists, and figured out, it took a couple of years to get the right medication, which for me, the gold was the magic bullet was lithium, which is really very, very effective for bipolar disorder. And for me, after it basically stabilized my mood very quickly, made me feel good. And so you got to get on the right medication. Then I would say work with a therapist, because the therapists don't prescribe medicine, but they can give you coping skills and figure out what are the triggers in your life. What are the topics, the people, the situations that can trigger you into agitation, anger, anxiety. And you need to know those, because that can trigger you back into a full up episode again of bipolar or some other mental condition. So the medical stuff is and then you need to live healthfully. I mean, diet, sleep, exercise, low stress, plenty of water. So I would say put that first basket of items that I just covered in healthful living and medication. Those are absolutely necessary, but they're not sufficient for recovery. In order to build a recovery that's built to last, you need to build a social platform. And in the article, I talked about the 4 Ps. Number one is people. Develop a network of energetic, happy, fun people who make you happy. Number two, live in a place that is safe, that energizes you, that inspires you, that enables you to do the things you want to do for your overall mental health. Number three, develop a purpose. Come up with an individual mission, which the military is great at. We all need a mission. So what's your mission? And it should be something that is bigger than yourself, inspires you to get up every day and work at it. Like for me now, it's mental health advocacy. The fourth P is perseverance. I mean, you can have all this stuff set up, but if you don't want to get better and want to stay well and fight, if you have to have a fighting spirit, the will to win in order for this all to succeed. And then the last one, the fifth P, which I just learned about this week, is presence. And I've had situations where I've lost perspective, and the idea of presence is situational awareness and being able to adapt to the music that's being played as opposed to the music you want to play. And being mentally and psychologically flexible so that you don't run into anxiety. Those are the main elements of recovery. And I had an article published in Psychiatric Times, and that's in a nutshell what I wrote the article on, and they loved it. They said, "Oh man, this is great," and they hadn't seen anything quite like that. So
fantastic. Well, sir, we are out of time. This has been a great conversation, and I wanted to thank you again for the courage and your commitment to talk to our viewers and our listeners, and to write for Proceedings, our audience, about your experience with PTSD and with bipolar disorder. I think the more that people talk about these problems, the more that people talk about the necessity of good health, of good sleep, of asking for help when you need help, or asking for help for your shipmates or your battle buddies who perhaps aren't recognizing the problems that they're facing themselves. It's incredibly important, incredibly powerful for helping military people and the institution as a whole get better. So thank you so much for that.
You're very welcome. And thanks for bringing me on, and thanks for publishing the article. And I just want to say to you and the audience that you, Bill, and USNI and Proceedings are doing an amazing job. I mean, just so high quality and so good to work with.
Thank you for that, sir. And to one of your P's there, the purpose. I can't tell people enough that this job, getting to do what I do as the editor-in-chief of Proceedings, it gives me that incredible energy and purpose to get up every morning and just keep doing it. Because one of the I'll share this. I shared this with a group of plebes who are here this past week. We have the incoming class of 2026, which is unbelievable to me, that number, because I'm 87. But one of the midshipmen asked me about what part of my job did I like the best. And over the years, we've published people from Lieutenant Chester Nimitz, Lieutenant E.J. King, Lieutenant Hyman Rickover, et cetera, right? Long before they became very famous Navy admirals and generals in the Marine Corps, et cetera. And I always wonder, which lieutenant, which major, which midshipman that I'm working with now as their editor is going to be the future Medal of Honor winner, the future 4-star, the future combatant commander, the future winner of a fight with, whoever our national adversary is. So that jazzes me considerably. It just makes it a great job. But sir, thanks again for you. And what a thrill for me to work with you at NDU and then work with you on this piece. It was just it was great. So really enjoyed it. Thanks again, and I look forward to hearing more about what you're doing in your new mission in life as an advocate for mental health.
Thanks, Bill.
Okay, well, that wraps up another episode of the Proceedings podcast. Thanks to our producer, Heather Legg. This episode is brought to you by Raytheon. Raytheon Missiles and Defense is setting the pace of performance with the Spy-6 family of radars actively being integrated across the fleet. Spy-6 provides the clearest possible picture of the battle space with modular multi-mission capabilities that make it the most advanced radar on Earth. Learn more at rtx.com/Spy-6. Until next episode, remember, victory begins at the Naval Institute.